Hello and welcome. This is another episode of Future Side Chats. This is our fourth episode of Future Side Chat, and this week we will be talking about everyone's favorite beverage. That's beer. I guess in theory we could talk about other brewed beverages like cider, for instance, but for now we'll leave it to beer. I'm joined as always by Nick, Maddox, and Mike Attrell. How you guys?
Doing great. This
Good to hear.
beautiful Saturday morning.
Today is actually a very special day, not only because we're doing beer as a topic, which I know that I've been waiting for since before these were even science-based, but we have an actual brewmaster with us. A literal brewmaster, Nick.
Literal.
And you have a beer that you are currently brewing right now that you're going to test for us.
Well, I'm actually finished brewing.
Well, yeah, fair enough.
The brewing was
And
finished
so
over a
the
week
lesson
ago.
starts.
It was then fermented for a week, and now it is in the bottle conditioning phase. So I don't actually think I can show you. There's like dead yeast at the bottom there. And theoretically, they're making this bubbly. However, I'm worried based on exactly how I did it that I might be making bombs out of these.
And so how might that happen?
Well, if you put it in a sealed container too soon, like you add a little bit of sugar to wake up the yeast before brewing, but if you take it from the primary fermenter and put it into a bottle before all of everything has been metabolized. And it should have been metabolized because I checked, but there will be too much pressure in there, and then they can explode. So in the interest of prudence, I'm going to crack this one after about 3-4 days. It will hopefully be flat. Otherwise, a horrible mess will be made.
So what would you do? Would you just take them all outside and let them...
Well, these ones are an easy resealable design, so you would just pop it and recap it.
Okay, you just vent it a
Just
little
like
bit.
vent it, yeah.
Okay.
So I also have a beer here with me. Mike has a different brew, but so we're gonna have fun on this episode. Why don't you give it a try, Nick?
Okay, fingers crossed.
All appendages crossed.
Ooh.
Can you see that?
Yeah. Oh yeah. There we go.
What am I looking at? Oh,
That's
yeah.
the oxide right there.
Just a little tiny bit. So it's not going to explode, guys.
Yay!
So let us know. This is your second home
What's
brew.
actually fizzing? Oh my God! There's a head on my beer. You have no idea. This took so long to happen on the other one.
So
And leaving just a little bit in the bottom because gross yeast.
yeah.
But let me see if I can. There's an actual appreciable head on that one.
That looks delicious.
Yeah. This is an American IPA. I don't know what makes it American.
Considering the IPA is
Strong,
from Britain, but
Strong hints of freedom,
From Britain and called
Beef.
Indian.
oil.
yeah, one of the things I learned in my extensive research is that the India Pale Ale comes from they call it India because when they were sending it to India, they needed to add extra hops which act as a preservative, and so when they did that, they brewed it with extra hops to get it to India. They ended up calling it just an India Pale Ale. Otherwise, it's the same as a regular Pale Ale.
But with more
But
hops.
so it ends up being stronger and more bitter.
Yep.
Interesting.
It was one example in English culinary history where the English actually tried something. We're like, damn, things with flavor actually taste really good. Like, we should try doing more of this flavor thing.
Yeah. I did probably not the most research, but near the most research I've ever done for one of these for this episode, because I wasn't too up on the science of beer. But I've actually got a couple notes here that say that the English actually have it right when it comes to the science of beer, in that they drink it warm, because cold beer actually masks the flavor, uh, or in the case of American macro brews, the lack of flavor that a lot of their beers have. So drinking it cold, while making it more refreshing and probably seeming more delicious, you're actually missing out on some of the full-bodied flavor of especially darker beers.
Mm-hmm.
My hypothesis there is that you don't actually want beer, you just want something fizzy that will get you drunk.
Exactly, and at that point you may as well have a cooler, which is also delicious and fizzy.
Although those are marketed towards women, and you gotta be a man, you gotta drink a beer, dang beer with the blue mountains on the can, and it's extra cold, god dang, beer.
It's got the cold indicator and everything.
So you're saying real men drink Coors Light? That's what, is that what you're trying to tell me?
I'm saying that's what the marketing would have you believe.
Yeah.
I thought one of the mountains is Kokanee. Isn't it?
Was
No,
Coors have mountains too?
no, it has mountains on the can, but the can actually, the mountains change color based on how cold the beer is.
Right.
Yeah. Really brilliant marketing, I must say, and good science.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I thought was, when we were talking about this episode, Nick, you raised an interesting point that is this actually a future side chat? Because how much do we really have to say about the future of beer and the future of brewing beer?
Well, I mean, the thing is that when you're talking about beer, you're talking about something that is basically as old as civilization itself. Like, all the archaeological, historical evidence, anyway, appears to point to the idea that, for Western civilization, anyway, about the time that we got together and started making agriculture a thing that happened, it was not too long after that that we figured out beer.
Right. Well, basically, we had to domesticate hops and barley in order to brew beer.
Yeah, yeah.
And
So,
say,
like,
well, yeah, go ahead.
no, it's like, and I mean, in an era before potable drinking water, like beer was a beverage that ended up getting boiled and sterilized in the brewing process. So, like, it's hypothesized that there is the existing stereotype that people of Southeast Asian heritage don't tend to handle their liquor nearly as well.
Right.
But the idea is that since beer was so integral in building Western society, like the societies that figured beer out were the societies that tended to thrive. So we actually have more, I think it's acetaldehyde dehydrogenase in our stomachs in the Western world of Western descent. And the reason for that is that we've actually like evolved over the time scale of beer to handle alcohol better. That's so fascinating to me though. Like we have actually evolved to be like, okay, listen, this beer thing needs to happen for civilization to really take hold. So we got to figure our stuff out, stomach. And stomach's like, yeah, okay, we can do this. We got this. Yeah.
Well, and the same thing happened, going off topic a bit, with milk. Eastern culture tends to be a lot more lactose intolerant, whereas people in the British Isles and Northern Europe were drinking milk and beer like crazy, and so we're a lot better equipped to handle it.
Eating cheese.
Yep. So one of the things that I think a lot of people who enjoy beer should do, as Nick instructed me to do, is to watch or listen to the podcast from How Stuff Works, which is Stuff You Should Know, and specifically their episode on beer. So they go into a bunch of detail, and they talk about, and one of the things that I wanted to talk about, because it is the future of beer, especially in Western, I guess, North America, is that craft brewing and microbrewing is having a huge resurgence, and it's basically it's almost at the peak that it was in the 1800s when it first started really taking off here. Even one of our guests today is doing his own craft brewing. And you've said yourself that it wasn't very expensive. I mean, you got the kit as a gift, but the kit itself isn't super expensive. And once you have it, you can basically go make your own beer for very little extra money.
Yeah. And I mean, a kit usually runs you, depending on the kit, mine were a little more expensive. Thanks, Mom! Because they actually came with like specialty grains and stuff like that for actual like more flavor and stuff like that. But I mean, I just brewed about 20 liters of beer for $40, which is less than half of what you would get on the market for that.
Sure.
Less than half the price of
Right.
what the equivalent market would be.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, it obviously does take some effort to do it, so your time is worth something as well, but it's not, unless you tell me differently, it's not a huge investment of time. It's maybe a few hours?
All told, I think cooling it off is the biggest time commitment, but you're probably looking at about, let's see, I bottled with the help of a couple other people in about an hour, and if you include the boil time, about 3 hours, maybe 4 to do the initial brewing. So less than 5 hours.
That's pretty impressive, I gotta say.
You also get delicious beer.
Yes.
Delicious, cheap beer. And, like, if you get past the kit phase, you can start, like, tailoring it to your individual tastes. So you get, instead of relying on other people, you can get exactly the beer you want.
Right. Plus the priceless satisfaction of doing it yourself and drinking beer that you made.
Taking part in a millennia-old tradition. Literally millennia have passed.
Okay, so I have a science question regarding beer. So you know how the show, I think it was bullshit that they did the wine blind taste test with the wine experts, and they tested the power of suggestion and the preconceived notion that expensive wines taste better, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm sure you guys have heard those types of studies before, right?
That you can tell red and white wine apart based on their taste.
Oh, if they were colored the same?
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so they've done those, but I'd like to know if you'd see similar results with beers, and if you tested people's biases towards specific brands or the size of the brewery or price. So like you just mentioned, it's cheap and delicious, right? Do people look for the more expensive beers and say, oh yeah, this is a really good beer, if they know how much they paid for it, as opposed to if they thought they paid less or if they didn't know that it was expensive or that kind of thing? So because like when I go to like a beer store, I look for things that I haven't tried before, right? If I see like a Budweiser or whatever, like I just personally I've never actually liked the taste of Budweiser. Molson Canadian's actually not bad, but like I'll still avoid it if I can, because like, oh, I don't want to have like the mass market stuff. I want to have like something new. But then I'll buy an import, and then someone will say, oh yeah, that's made by Budweiser, but just over in like Japan or something, right?
Yeah, it's like Anheuser-Busch.
Yes, Anheuser-Busch, their brew there, and I'm like, oh, it's actually not bad. So it's like, okay, well, how often does that actually happen where you have these biases towards one way or the other, and then it actually doesn't make that much of a difference when you control for it in an experiment setting? Like, what have you guys found in your experience when you're trying different beers?
Yeah, can I say something first and then let Nick give a fuller answer? I'm pretty sure Pabst Blue Ribbon is like a gourmet beer in Japan.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. And I have an anecdote to tell after this, but Nick, why don't you give a scientific answer?
In terms of perception, like, I may be way off here, but I think with beer anyway, you're looking at a much broader palette of things to flavor with. So, like, perception heavily influences vodkas, I know, and wines, things like that, but I feel like there's only so much you can do with the flavor of wines and spirits and stuff like that. I mean, unflavored spirits. But with something like beer, where, I mean, comparing a Sapporo to an IPA, like, completely different things.
Hmm.
Um, and the other thing is you don't face nearly the price variance, I don't feel, in Canada anyway, because we have such high minimum prices for alcohol sales. So I'm not sure, like, the other thing is, I know, like, um, a lot of effort is put into marketing with wines and spirits and stuff like that to make them seem extra fancy so that people will buy them. Um, I'm not sure beer is marketed in the same way. Like, I almost never see an ad for beer that says you should drink this because it tastes good. You see them like, you should drink this because you're a fun-loving kind of fella, and
And there are girls in
beer,
bikinis here.
yeah, beer's the drink for men that like frolicking with bikini-clad ladies, and stuff like that. So I think the marketing tack is slightly different.
Well, now that you have the big breweries trying to look like craft brew
Yeah.
beers, like
Oh,
You have Keith starting to diversify their flavor profiles and making their cans all colorful and patterned, and even I've read stories on Budweiser, like literally coming out with brands under different names to pass as microbrews when
or like
they're still brewed by Budweiser.
there is a microbrew called Creemore Springs that was acquired by Molson Coors. It might have been Molson at the time, but they
Yeah.
like looked at the craft
Yeah.
beer market and they were like, "Oh my God, we have to acquire this
Yeah.
smaller one."
Yeah. No, this was one that the beer was literally brewed in their brewery, and it was a Budweiser beer, but they were marketing it under a different name. Like it still said, "Oh, brewed by
Okay.
Anheuser-Busch" on the can, I think, but
Mhm.
it was
Did they vary
under.
the recipe at all?
I have no idea. I don't know the
I would
backstory.
imagine they would, because these people have been doing this for generations. They do know how to make beer.
Hmm.
They have brewmasters that are very good at their job. Um, on the note of quality, I want to tell a little story about my old professor Dave Bryce, who works in the chemistry department at Ottawa U. We have a beer pub in our Little Italy in Ottawa.
Pub Italia.
Italia, yes. And they have like hundreds of beer taps, and they have even more in bottles, and they have specials that come in every week. And so my old supervisor would go into that restaurant when we would go as a group, or when he would go with people, and basically ask the waitress to surprise him, like to give him a beer in a nondescript glass, and he would try to guess what the beer was, just based on flavor and color. And the one time I saw him try this, he actually got it right.
Hmm.
And so I find it hard to believe that someone would be able to do that with wine. But beers do have very distinct flavors, and even that wasn't actually like a very fancy beer. It ended up being Stiegel, which is a pretty
It was
good beer.
also the Stiegel Radler, if I
Yeah.
recall that story correctly.
But first of all, I was very impressed by that. But second of all, I feel like that, even though it's anecdotal, he does it on a regular basis. So I don't think that you can really say to the same degree um, that beer is all about perception. Like the different ones do have different tastes.
Yeah. Well, with wine, you have the different vineyard types or whatever. You have like your Merlots and your, I don't know, Sauvignon, whatever. I don't know.
All the
Um,
Merlot. Right? So like I'm sure someone who's drinking wine could pick
Pinot
between those.
Grigio, I
Yeah. So yeah, so I'm sure you could pick between those, but I don't think you'd be like, oh, this is like a 95 Merlot, like just based on the taste.
right,
Like,
not necessarily the age, but
no.
yeah. From what I've seen, a lot of the people who say that they're wine experts have a hard time doing blind taste tests. And
yeah.
maybe Dave would have a different proposition if he was asked to do a blind. Like they can't see the beer, they can't see the
Hmm.
wine.
Hmm.
That might be a little harder because a lot of it does come from the color and the texture of it,
Hmm.
the way it looks. I was still very impressed.
Rightly so. And I mean, like, not long ago, I was out with my friends and I walked away from the table and I came back and they'd ordered another pitcher while I was absent. And I was like, oh, okay, well, this could be interesting. I tried some, and I stopped, and you guys ordered the Rolling Rock Blonde. And they were like, ha, 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 ha. So, yeah, like, it is possible to pick them out that way.
I mean, that instance might be a little different because I'm assuming they didn't have hundreds of taps. You probably knew what was on.
No, there were like 7 taps or so.
But it is interesting when beers do look the same, but you get one that's not right.
Yeah.
It's sort of like telling Diet Coke from regular Coke in that instance. This tastes like aspartame.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to briefly talk about, and I don't know too much about it, so maybe I won't go into too much detail. Maybe, Nick, if you could fill in blanks, is some of the interesting science that goes into making certain specific beers, like Guinness, for instance. One of the interesting things that I heard, or that I saw the first time that I had Guinness, I had it in one of the bottles. It was one of the first, I think the first time they introduced it in bottles. It's got the little, it looks like a ping pong ball, but it's a little bubbler filled with nitrogen.
Widget, I think they called it.
I forgot that they used that word because I have it in a totally different part of my brain now, but I call it a widget. But I thought it was really interesting that Guinness used nitrogen as a gas to pressurize it. I'm assuming there's still some carbon dioxide in there, but it's not the main one. Do you know anything about, I mean, obviously the bubbles in Guinness are talked about a lot, and they're a little bit different from the bubbles in normal beer.
They're a big deal.
Yeah.
Like, you can lose certification. You can lose your ability to pour Guinness if you do it poorly. Like, if you... No,
Pour.
Beer world.
But no, legitimately, if, like, I guess they can, like, test you on it, and if you pour one with inappropriate head amounts, they will, like, not let you do it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But there's actually, like, it's like the companion to Periodic Table of Videos, but the physics one. I think 60 Symbols.
Yep.
I think 60 Symbols did an episode on the foam in Guinness specifically because they use nitrogen, and the reason for that is that carbon dioxide bubbles, which are the normal bubbles you find, end up being they participate in the carbonic acid equilibrium, which Rob will know about. Mm-hmm. So you can actually dissolve the gas and like exchange back and forth that way in a liquid. Whereas nitrogen isn't nearly as soluble in water. So the idea is that you can have that perfect foam, that perfect head, and the beer that it sits atop will not interfere with it at all.
Right. And so, from what I understood, and maybe I'm remembering this wrong because it was a while ago, the bubbles in nitrogen actually appear to sink instead of rise, which I thought was also interesting, and it has to do with the fact that it's nitrogen.
I got nothing.
Like, yeah, the head will be sitting atop it, but then the bubbles will seem, I don't know if they actually do, but they seem to fall down instead of rising up from the bottom.
Oh, is that like the kind of milky phase?
Yeah.
Where it looks like a thing of chocolate milk and you have to wait for it to settle?
Yeah.
So is the nitrogen contributing to the fact that it's a flatter beer as opposed to more bubbly?
I guess. Like, the other issue is, so there probably won't be nearly as many dissolved gases to give you that acidic tingle to your tongue, I guess. But I think since you always have the foam sitting on the top, it contributes to the mouthfeel of the beer, which they want to be very specific and very controlled, which is why they have the widget. But you find mouthfeel in a variety of beverages. Like my espresso machine, for example, puts a crema on top of the actual coffee, which legitimately, if you have a flat shot of espresso, you can taste the difference.
I love the word mouthfeel, by the way. That's one of my favorite words. The first time I heard it, it's just so good.
It's a technical term, mouthfeel.
It is.
Can we go back to the cold versus warm beer
Yeah.
talk? Because I don't think I've ever encountered a pub that serves any variety of brew at room temperature the way it's quote unquote intended to be. If anything, they'll give you a frozen glass and pour the beer inside of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've heard the Guinness community outraged by the fact that they're even cold, let alone in a frozen glass.
Yeah.
Well, I believe the reason for that is America! Heck yeah!
Thank you for censoring yourself.
I've missed censoring myself a few times on the podcast, so I'm glad I'm catching up.
It's interesting because there are a lot of, and I've never been to the UK, but pubs in England do serve beer warm, like as a rule. And I think, I haven't seen any in Ottawa that do, but I believe that when I was in Halifax, they served some beer warm. Maybe that's just because they're closer to their
English roots.
Motherland. Although,
What's
if
your
we're being
opinion on that?
serious, Nova Scotia would be Scotland, so...
I was gonna, yeah. Anyways,
What's your opinion on that, Nick? About have you had room temperature beer before?
The beer I'm having now is more or less room temperature. There are also, like, I will actually, like, I will sometimes sample a beer cooled and at room temperature just to see what the difference is. Like, I think I did that with some of the Wild Rose brewed stuff that I've had before, but yeah. You know what? Usually I'm drinking it cold because cultural influences.
Well, you're used to it. Like, I don't know. I like a cold beer.
I mean, on a cold day or a hot day, it's just, you don't want a lukewarm beverage, you want a cold beverage. Although apparently that's another, like, distinctly American thing, to want a cold beverage.
Scientifically, a hot beverage actually cools you more.
Over the course of consumption, yes.
Induces sweating and relief of internal heat.
that does not count.
Yeah,
One of the interesting things that I learned yesterday, again from the beer podcast, is that the word lager is actually German for storage, like to store, and it refers to the fact that they stored it in cold temperatures to allow like that. That is literally the only difference between ales and lagers is the temperature that they're stored at.
It's also the yeast, though, because ale. Well, no, like, because the ale yeast I use will sit on the top, and it actually, like, thrives at higher temperatures. But you can try and do a lager at higher temperatures, and it just won't work as well, apparently.
I've always found ales to be stronger flavored. I don't know if that's maybe just my
Part of that is the yeast.
perception.
Like, the yeast that you find in Bavaria is often lager yeast, like the wild yeast just floating around, and it tends to contribute less flavor to the brew, as I understand it. And ales, like, even the smell of my last two brews were entirely different, and it was almost entirely due to the different yeasts that I used. Like, they actually advertised this yeast packet that I have as being, since it's for an IPA, they didn't want as much flavor contribution from the yeast itself. So they actually used, like, a yeast with less flavor. It still got some of the fruitier notes that I had from the last one, but yeah. There's a non-trivial contribution to the flavor of the beer from the yeast. If you ever have fin du monde, that's a very, very fruity beer, and I guess it's the yeast contribution.
Interesting. Yeah, that what brewery is it that does fin du monde?
Unibrew.
They have a couple of good ones. I don't remember like the names of all of them, but I remember seeing that the brew is the same, and I remember enjoying the ones that I tried.
Yeah, they've got Chamblay and Mozi or a couple other ones. Very nice. Good time.
So before we get to what I understand is a big gripe of Nick's, I want to talk. I want to just ask you guys to take an informal poll about with the resurgence of craft breweries. Do you guys think, just off the top of your head, would you say there are more podcasts in North America or craft breweries?
That's such a good question.
A lot of both, and they overlap in so many ways.
I'm gonna say more podcasts.
I'm gonna agree. I think it's more podcasts.
You know, it's probably the other way around. I think my first instinct would be more podcasts.
What if we include? I mean, a craft brewery is a very specific thing. Like it's an actual brewery. But what if you include people like Nick who are just home brewing?
Oh, that doesn't count. No
How
offense,
do you even know?
No offense to Nick, but that doesn't count as a craft brewery.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. I believe this qualifies as a Pico brewery right now.
No, but that's my question: is which you think? Are there more people brewing beer or making podcasts?
Then brewing beer.
Okay.
It's got to be beer then.
Yeah.
Okay. There's no way to test this. There's no way to.
No.
I thought you had an answer.
I thought, yeah. Oh, you don't have an anscer?
I don't have an answer.
Oh, come on.
Neither of those are questions on the census.
What do you think it is?
What would you say it is, Rob?
I would have to say, having looked through the podcast database, there's probably more podcasts.
Even including individual brews, like brewers?
Including individual brews. I think I don't know.
There are
a lot of people making moonshine out there.
I was going to say there are a whole bunch of baby boomers that are currently brewing beer that have no idea what a podcast is.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
If we're talking all time, I'm sure there are more people who have brewed beer than who have made podcasts.
No.
Well, all time, obviously, because since we became civilization, we've been brewing beer.
I think
you're looking at billions versus I don't know, hundreds of thousands.
No, I was thinking the same thing as Nick, that there's 60-year-old guys, 50-year-old guys, 40-year-old guys who don't even listen to podcasts or know what a podcast is, and they're brewing beer.
But there are a lot of people who make podcasts that just have zero audience.
But there's
for themselves.
I think you're more likely to have someone who has a podcast and also brews beer, as opposed to the other way around.
True. Yeah.
So they'd be counted twice, like once in both, and then you're gonna have everyone who doesn't do a podcast but brews beer.
We can land on that side. I'll agree. I'll concede that you're probably right. But I will say that unscientifically, people who make podcasts are statistically almost 100% likely to also enjoy beer. I've never heard of anyone who does podcasts that doesn't like beer.
I've actually heard of a lot of podcasts where they make a point to drink beer.
Yeah.
It's not just Ottawa, it's a bunch of other ones too.
What about the AA podcast?
Is that real?
They like it too much.
That sounds like they have a problem. They like it too much. So, Nick, we can get to you now. I want to know. I'm really interested now because we didn't talk about it before we started. For those people who don't know, in Ontario, the sale of alcohol is extremely limited.
Very regulated.
Regulated is the better word. And so why don't you just talk a bit about that, Nick, and then get to the issues you have with it.
So the 3 places you can buy, 4 places you can buy alcohol in Ontario. You can buy it directly from microbreweries or like brew pubs or something like that, and restaurants. Those are licensed under what I believe is the LLBO, the Liquor Licensing Board of Ontario. You can buy from the LCBO, which is the Liquor Control Board of Ontario. These are all like Prohibition era dinosaurs that still exist. And it's worth noting that the LCBO provides like, what is it, like half of Ontario's income or something like that? It's probably not that high, but it's a lot.
It also takes half of Ontario's income.
Right.
The Ontario Student Loan and the Ontario like Liquor Control Board is just like a little multiplier cycle. But no, so like it's to the point where like when we first read about the statistics and we cracked open something from the LCBO, to Ontario, to her roads and schools and bridges that we are contributing to and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But the other one is the beer store, where they can only sell beer under. Sorry?
That's 3.
Yeah, so where's 4?
LLBO, or restaurants, microbreweries,
okay.
LCBO, beer store.
They have the
wine
beer
rack.
store. The wine rack.
Okay. The beer store and
what about casinos?
That would count as a restaurant.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Anyway.
Or, anyway. Yeah. So the LCBO and the beer store are 2 separate entities. It was another Prohibition era project and they can only sell like malt liquor under 10% or something like that. And it is owned, I want to say it's 47.5% by Labatt, 47.5% by Molson, and 3% by Sleeman. The problem with that, well, Sleeman was also there,
How would there possibly be a problem with that?
Isn't Sleeman owned by Molson?
So, hold on, I'm getting there. The problem with that model, it's actually called Brewers Retail, like the official name of it, because it was put on by the brewers. The problem with that is that I believe Labatt is now owned by InBev. Molson is now Molson Coors, an international conglomerate. And I think Sleeman is owned by Anheuser-Busch or something.
Oh, it's either Molson or it's either Molson or Budweiser. I don't know.
Yeah, so like it was originally. Sorry?
Is Keith's owned by Molson?
Keith's is owned by Labatt's, which is in turn owned by InBev.
Oh, okay.
So the problem with that is it was, a Canadian solution. Like you had Canadian brewers coming together and running this distribution system. But it's not that anymore. They have a pseudo-monopoly, and it's run by international conglomerates. It's not for the benefit of Canadian companies anymore. It's not for the benefit of Canadian consumers, because I can't possibly imagine that we benefit from having a pseudo-monopoly run by the brewers themselves who profit from the product. It's like going to a car dealership now.
Right. And that's all you need.
Just beer, yeah.
So, yeah, and so it's a pseudo-monopoly, but not actually by like Canadian companies, so we don't even get the benefit from that. The profits go to like Japan and Belgium and Canada, U.S. I'm not sure where their official headquarters are. I think like honestly, Denver is probably the bigger deal than Montreal, but
yeah,
that's my issue with Brewers Retail.
So, what in less than 100 words, what would your solution be to start?
Privatize beer sales.
So just take it back to what everyone else is doing.
Yeah, honestly, like, and this is a separate rant. I don't count this in the 100 words. Since finding out that like beer came around at about the same time as agriculture, like I think like beer and civilization have just for so long. How do you keep that out of the hands of the people? How do you regulate such a thing? Should be a human right, I say.
To buy beer.
We've had beer longer than we've had a right to free speech.
So, are you legally? You're obviously legally entitled to sell, or not sell, to give away the beer that you make, or to let people drink it with you. But are you allowed to sell it? Like,
I sure hope so. I can't. I don't. I think it would be illegal for me to like sell or barter.
yeah,
What about exchange?
that sounds like bartering to me.
Well, I mean, if someone brought over a few pizzas and I let them into the fridge for a beverage, I don't see how that could possibly.
See, and if they came over and they happened to leave $5 on the table, then it's like you can't stop that. It's like, what are you gonna do?
Don't joke about that. I actually think I could get in trouble.
I'm sure that's the thing that they're cracking down on.
Yeah, like Pico brewers or Addo brewers like myself. Someone just like leaves a 20 on the table. I'm like, no, pretty filthy money that I can't accept. Just like take it out to the backyard and burn it right there. Except that would be
Which is
the
also
fancy
illegal.
currency. Yeah, this is just what are my options here?
You have to just drink it all, I guess.
Oh no! I like beer.
Yeah. So one of the last things that I have here to talk about is going back a bit to the future thing. And maybe this is just me because I'm naive and fairly young. I've only been drinking for 6 years. Is these things like mini kegs. Nick and I were discussing just before 12:30 the Bubba of beer. Coming up with new methods of storing and distributing alcohol. So I don't know if obviously for a long time people have been brewing beer and storing it in kegs, like regular full-size kegs, but these new mini kegs are very intriguing to me.
You know what we need is pipelines.
I was actually just thinking about that.
Me too. I was like, how do you distribute a fluid like across it? Well, actually,
we could set up maybe start
water
brewing
comes
beer in the
water
north.
comes out of a tap, so the next logical leap would be
exactly.
We would brew with the beer up north, and then we would have some kind of pipeline to bring it down south to Canada and to the U.S.
And it would self-chill.
We would store it far enough underground that it would be cold, but not so far that it would be hot.
Exactly.
The lagers you brew like slightly farther north, so it's colder.
This is a brilliant idea. I was thinking more about the mini kegs, but yeah.
I'm so glad I wasn't the only one thinking about pipelines.
Well, where do you even go from mini kegs, though? I mean, Heineken still does them, but I don't know of that many breweries that still do it.
There was one, I forget what beer it was, but it, and we couldn't get it to work properly. It would give out like 90% foam, but it actually came with a little CO2 cartridge that you'd pop out of a little nook and cranny and open it, and then you'd tap it you'd tap it with a little lever. But it was basically self-carbonating at the time of opening instead of before. Which I thought was pretty good.
Okay.
Although it didn't work. It didn't really. It was all foam and.
So kind of like a soda stream, but like.
Actually, in Reddit's homebrewing subreddit, a guy recently posted results of forced carbonating with a soda stream.
Didn't work?
Where did it go?
It sounds like it didn't work.
It worked. No, it worked. Like, he showed it. It was a beer with a head. Like, the difference between what I'm doing here with, like, bottle conditioning and forced carbonating, like, when you're kegging a beer, you don't, you usually filter out all the yeast and then force carbonate it with carbon dioxide so it's foamy. But honestly, a soda stream, same difference. Like, you're just force carbonating something with high pressure.
So you would take a flat beer that you just made, and then you'd run it through a soda stream, and instantly you'd have. I mean.
Yeah, the only difference is like I'm carbonating with biological action, and you're carbonating with high pressure carbon dioxide.
Right, but so
The result is the same.
would that shorten, if you bought a soda stream, would that shorten your process a lot? If you wanted carbonated beer.
Well, you can also like carbonate a keg, like as homebrewers do. They just do it with like larger gas canisters.
Okay. Interesting. So I don't know if you guys have anything else more you want to add, but before we go, I want to know how it turned out, Nick, taste-wise.
I'm pretty impressed actually. Like it's still a little sweet, and time will take care of that because it did with the last brew. And I think it's just a touch strong.
Is that bad or is that good? Good. You sort of phrased it badly.
It's neither bad nor good, but I was getting towards the end of it and going, I'm feeling that one. No, the other thing is, like, I should actually look into how much a contribution it is, but you put a little extra sugar when you're about to bottle, and that's so that the yeast have something to eat as they carbonate the beer further. And so the alcohol will be just a little higher than what it was supposed to be. And in an IPA, like often IPAs will be at a slightly higher alcohol percentage because the alcohol actually solvates the flavor of the hops, so it keeps the hop flavor in the beer. And so it was a little high to start with, and soon I will get up and walk around, and I will really know how strong it was.
Well, I hope you'll let us know, because this is your second bout of brewing.
Yes, I am going to do so much more. It's wonderful. The beer is tasty, and back of the envelope calculations indicate it's roughly on the same price range as milk is. So
that's lovely.
Can't go wrong there.
Yeah.
Is there anything else either of you want to add or ask or?
Oh, I have a really exciting note. Beer drives the Canadian economy.
Yes.
I can't remember off the top of my head. It was at least like 1% of the Ontario's economy comes from beer. Like the craft brewers and the bottlers and the hop growers and the barley growers, like they're all in the same province or same country maybe. So like there's a whole economic multiplier that happens just within Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So beer built Western civilization, and it continues to drive it forward.
I don't know if 1% counts as driving, but they're at least nudging.
I'll take it.
It's the 1% that puts us above where we would have been without it.
And then you have the
I feel like
99%.
my quality of life is 1% better from having beer in the country. And then you drink it yourself, and it's so much more than that.
Completely agree. Are you guys happy with where we've ended up? I'm fairly satisfied.
We should probably do another episode or 5.
We probably should.
Yeah, so much more to talk about.
I will continue to learn.
Beer!
And then we can do another. We'll just call it beer and we'll just drink.
You know what the problem with wine is?
So I'm going to say I think this is the second time, if you've made it this far, which I hope you have in the episode, go and follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook.
Plus us on Google Plus.
Well, plus us and
Circle us, I guess.
follow us. Yeah.
Yeah.
We've been gaining momentum. A third of the total views of the YouTube videos and the Google Plus page have come in the last month.
Nice.
Wow.
So we're gaining steam.
Are they all from like India and Pakistan?
No.
No, that's good.
And
No,
someone
no offense to Indians and Pakistanis, but just
No, that's far away.
yeah,
Yeah.
more of
There are
this
people-
click farm type views as opposed to.
There are people in our
Get this.
circles that do not know any of us.
You're kidding.
That was my goal. No,
We need to change that though.
Hi,
They need to
strange
get to know
people.
us.
we need to change that. We need to get people only that know us.
No, we need to get to know the people that are watching us. That's what I'm saying.
That's true.
Well,
Yeah.
I've always said the Q&A app is open on every episode, and we've had a couple questions, but there hasn't been one in this episode so far. But ask questions if you have them.
None about free energy.
Or just make comments.
Unless they're about free energy, then don't ask. Yeah, that's true. I think that's a good place to stop, right?
Yeah.
Future Tech Chat next week.
Next week we might. I guess sleep seems like a pretty good, or maybe just activity tracking in general,
Mm-hmm.
including
That does sound good.
because I didn't do my research this week that we talked about last week about installing a sleep app and using it.
Yeah.
But this week, let's do that, and then we'll see how it goes.
Okay. So we're all gonna
Alrighty.
install sleep apps.
Well, or just use the ones that we already
I'm
have.
already there. Like, I've been doing it for the past couple
Oh.
weeks.
Okay. Maybe I'll have to start then.
I'll start with Android and Apple, and I'll compare them.
Okay.
That sounds good.
All right, I'll talk to you guys later.
See you guys next week.
See you later.
Bye.